Hello and welcome to the first learning module titled Film Studies and Overview. Now before I delve into the main content of this tutorial, I'd like to speak a little bit about the overall importance of film in society. Erwin Panofsky wrote in 1934, "If all the serious lyrical poets, composers, painters, and sculptors were forced by law to stop their activities, a rather small fraction of the general public would become aware of the fact, and a still smaller fraction would seriously regret it. If the same thing were to happen with the movies, the social consequences would be catastrophic." Now this might seem like a hyperbolic statement, but I think it's an apt description of how important film is to society. So why do we study film? Well, there are many reasons, but the main reason is that it's the most popular form of entertainment, not just in the United States, but worldwide. It also has a tremendous influence on society, historically and currently. So I'd like to take a moment to examine what informs our expectations going into film. At the most basic level, what informs our expectations about film is the film title. Now, some film titles are a little more direct than others, while some are more obscure. The type of film, or the genre, is very important in informing our expectations about film. You're going to have different expectations going into a rom-com than you would a horror film. The type of director is another thing that informs our expectations. A Quentin Tarantino film is going to be much different than a Spike Lee film. The type of actor, too, is another way that we have some sort of expectation about a film. A Will Ferrell film is going to be much different than a Ryan Gosling film. Our prior knowledge of a film, whether it's an adaptation of a popular book or a sequel in a series of films, will definitely give us a specific idea about what to expect in these films. Often we rely on film critics or online services like Rotten Tomatoes to tell us or give us an idea what to expect with a particular film. Film trailers are also very effective in letting us know what to expect in any type of film. I'd now like to talk about the difference between a passive viewer and an active viewer. Now, as a passive viewer, you usually watch for entertainment or escape. It's a great way to immerse yourself in the narrative without really thinking about any of the critical elements that go into making that film. Conversely, as an active viewer, your main goal is to watch the film to engage in critical analysis. As an active viewer, you can also have a better idea about how to identify some of the themes and motifs and other important details about a film and any social commentary that the filmmaker might be trying to convey. In order to conduct better critical analysis about a film, we need to watch a film in the optimal viewing environment. Now, obviously, if you can watch a film in the theater, that's the best way to see it. But many of us watch films at home or outside of a theater. And we're going to look at some of those conditions that I recommend you follow in order to be able to conduct proper critical analysis. At the most basic level, it's best to watch a film in one continuous sitting without any interruptions. You want to avoid multiple screens while viewing, and that includes your computer or your phone. And if possible, watch a film in its original aspect ratio. Now, you may have seen a disclaimer for films that are on TV indicating that the film has been altered to fit the screen that you're watching. This is where letterboxing comes into place. It allows us to watch a film in the original aspect ratio intended by the director. I'd like to now spend some time talking about the three basic film styles that we study. Now, there are many different styles of film. We talk about genre, or we talk about different film movements, but at the most basic level, there are three that we study in film. The first is realism. This is usually associated with documentary film, but it applies to all different types of film. Then there is formalism. This is often associated with experimental or avant-garde films, but this style is in many different types of film. And finally, there's classicalism. And this is where it's somewhere in between those two styles. And the main idea about classicalism is that it focuses primarily on the narrative. So let's take a look at the three different ones in greater detail, starting with realism. So realism is defined as the film style that attempts to represent the look of reality as viewers see, hear, and experience the real world. Moving on to formalism, it's defined as the film style that intends to distort reality using filmmaking techniques. Now, this could be seen in odd camera angles or quick cuts or jump cuts. The sound is very unnatural or almost surreal. And the acting and costumes and settings are meant to distort reality in some way, shape, or form. And finally, there's classicalism. Now, this is the film style that is defined as the one that avoids the extremes of realism and formalism. The main hallmark of the classical film style is that all the filmmaking elements support the narrative. Now, this takes the form of linear plots, active and identifiable characters, and invisible editing. Now, it's good to keep in mind that rarely does a single film exhibit one of these styles exclusively. Most films, especially modern films, have a combination of all three of these styles, but typically one does tend to dominate. I'd like to now look at some of the approaches to studying film by examining some of the critical methods and theories used in film scholarship. Now, I provided you with a list of some of the key film theories that scholars use, and you will be applying some of these throughout this course in analyzing different films. Now, film has its own visual language, and it's very similar in many ways to the spoken language. And let's take a look at some of those elements of the visual language of cinema. Now, the vocabulary is simply the building blocks of film. This takes the form of the visual and audio elements that are created in the filmmaking process. Grammar of film is the set of rules that govern how the elements in the film vocabulary are typically arranged. Moving on to semantics, this focuses on the ways in which the visual and audio elements in a film are arranged. And finally, there's pragmatics. Now, this examines signs and symbols used in film for their context and meaning beyond the literal to the figurative meanings. Now, why do we look at the visual language of cinema? Well, it's very important both as filmmakers and as film viewers. As filmmakers, we need to understand and apply these elements to create more artful and meaningful films. As viewers, it allows us to understand and apply these elements to gain a greater understanding and deeper appreciation of film. I'd now like to take a look at some of the tools of film analysis that allow us to focus in our critical analysis of films. A trope is a recognizable element that can be used to create familiarity and understanding with an audience. Tropes can be considered a type of cliché or a common narrative convention. Looking at the different types of film tropes, there are character tropes, plot formulas, genre-specific tropes, and visual and cinematic elements. Now, it's important to note that subverting tropes can help avoid falling into the area of cliché and add dramatic tension or comedic value to a film. The next tool of film analysis I'd like to look at is the motif. Now, motifs are any film element that's visual or audio that takes on special meaning through repetition. Now, it's important to keep in mind this idea of repetition because anytime you see anything in a film multiple times, it has specific meaning and usually is very important to the themes or overall plot of the film. Some of the different types of motifs are visual, which are occurring images, objects, or symbols. There are audio motifs, also known as leitmotifs, which are repeated sounds or musical cues. An example of this would be Darth Vader's breathing in Star Wars, or the Imperial March song that announces the presence of the Empire or of some of the main villains in the film. Then there are narrative motifs. One of the most familiar is the MacGuffin. Now, this is a visual object that helps convey the plot forward or add some element to the film. And then there are color motifs that can be tied to a particular color palette throughout the film or the appearance of a particular color that has some sort of symbolic meaning. Another tool of film analysis I'd like to look at would be themes. Now, themes are an underlying main concept that serves as the message the filmmaker intends to convey to the audience. Now, let's look at some ways how to identify themes in films. The main thing is to look for recurring motifs, images, sounds, or lines of dialogue in the film. You can analyze the character's action, dialogue, and relationships. Consider the film's setting, time period, and social context. And think about the overall message the film is trying to convey to the audience. Now, looking for these themes will be very helpful in conducting a deeper level of film analysis. So I'd like to end this tutorial by talking about some final recommendations on how to conduct film analysis. So first, you will examine films through the lens of the visual language of cinema and how this language contributes to the overt or suggested meanings in film. You'll need to look for key visual and audio elements indicating which film style, speaking of realism, formalism, or classicalism, are most evident in the film. It's also important to identify and evaluate any motifs, those recurring elements and themes in the film for their significance to the plot and potential social commentary. This concludes the film analysis tutorial. It's now time to move on to the film clip viewing assignment for this module.